talk about some important dates coming up for CIPs and grants. So first thing to start off with, this is our CIP Kickoff Workshop. So as you probably guessed, CIPs will be open this afternoon for editing, both state and federal. Purely our system, or what are they doing in the first part of December? So December 1st, we are hoping that all CIPs will be submitted to us. As that date approaches, you'll probably be getting some interesting emails from us requesting that you go in there and update your CIP and actually hit the submit button. And so again, it's all in whim, so that the 1st of December is the same for both of us. Grant applications due for the state and the FAA are going to be January 15th. That is different than usual for the state. We've actually pushed that back to match the federal deadline of the 15th. But in relation to that, the 15th was actually chosen because that's actually the day that the environmental reviews are due as well. Is that accurate?
Correct. So we don't have, at this time, we don't have a firm deadline for when grant applications have to come in. As project managers working on our grants coming up for the year, the environmental actions, the checklists, if you have any other supporting documents from the environmental side, we really do need those by the middle of January. We have one person within our office that has to review them all. If every airport in our office took a grant, that's 117 actions. So she needs some time. So we ask for the middle of January for the submittal for the environmental. We figured if you're submitting on time for your environmental, you know you're going to have a grant. Try to have those mirror up and just have the grant application in. Case by case, we can accept grant applications afterwards, but it helps our program not be ready to give you a grant come April or May and then turn around and say, you never asked for it yet. So that'll help us. Thank you.
Perfect. And so because we pushed our deadline back for grant applications back to January 15th, we are also pushing our grant hearing, which is usually done in conjunction with CAOA in January. We are pushing that back to our board meeting in March. So grant hearings, so where our board actually goes and approves each of the individual state grants, will be March 8th. And then last one on my side, CIP finalization. So as we said, CIPs are due submitted to us by December 1st. We, the CDOT and the FAA, will be going through every one of those project by project, airport by airport, and getting a very good look statewide at what the needs are. And then we're hoping to have the CIP update process done by the end of January of 2017. And so at the end of that process, there will be an email that goes out to all of the airport sponsors informing them that the FAA and CDOT has completed our review of the CIP and it's now accepted. And so the email will tell you to go online to WIMS and review your CIP. So we're hoping to have that whole process done by January 2017. I hope to get that done. It's always a struggle. So I'll throw it over to Mark for the rest of the FAA dates.
Sure. We had a couple more dates from the federal side, and this ties directly in correlation with the federal grant process for us. Biggest question that you all have, and you know I don't have the answer for, is when will funding be available come the year? It's always a guesstimate for us, but if we can ensure that we have the environmental in place, once we have the environmental, when funding does become available, that's the first trigger for us that we can't move on programming your federal grant until we have the environmental in. So middle of January still for the environmental. That hasn't changed over the years. This next one, we used to harp more for the bigger discretionary projects, but with the construction season that we've been seeing and some of our bidding practices, we're really trying to encourage sponsors and their consultants to have bids open by the 1st of April. What that will allow us to do, where possible, is potentially get out ahead of some of the other construction projects, including federal highways and even some state CDOT projects as far as paving goes. Hopefully we can capture some bids. If we're successful, great. and then we can know actual bid amounts. So when we go to issue a grant, we can tie them. Of if we receive one bidder, no bids, it allows us the opportunity still within the fiscal year to go back, retweak the project however you may need to, try a different strategy for going out for bid, and still being able to get a second run at it within the same summer so that you don't miss your construction season. It may be a third option where it has to be pushed until the following year if it's just not working for whatever reason, but at least having bids open early gives you the flexibility to react if you don't get what you're hoping for the first go around. The next line item down is the negotiated fees for the planning projects. This really will help Linda if you can have them around the 1st of June or sooner. Similar to our construction projects, 95% of our grants have to be based on bids, and that includes the negotiated fees. So we cannot issue more than 1 or 2 grants a year totally, as far as the entire office goes, based on estimates. So make sure you get with your sponsors and consultants, get your scope of work approved, go out, have your IFEs if necessary, and please have those all done so that Linda can then help issue the grants based on known costs. Land acquisition, similar to the planning process, we gave a little bit more time only because in the federal side of the house, for us to reimburse land, there actually has to be a accepted offer and transition, which includes appraisal leading up to it, before we can issue the grant. So that's why we pushed it a little bit later to the 1st of July. By that point is, again, known costs, but really once you get the federal grant for a land reimbursement project, you can turn that money right around, buy the land, and it should be a very seamless transition with not a lot of extra time on the back end. And the last one is the deadline for carryover. Something will come out within the Federal Register. It does every year. Half of the country doesn't seem to follow it, but the intent behind it is really quite simple. In that, if you know you don't have a federal project this year, and you're wishing to carry your entitlements over, let's go ahead and get those reported sooner than later. What that allows us to do as a system is those funds get carried over, they're secured for you for next year, but we as FAA actually go in and redistribute those carried over funds back in discretionary. So it helps us get further down our list of discretionary projects. The sooner, the more funds that we have carried over sooner. So, and then again, come the following year, your entitlements are reimbursed right off the top of our program, so they're never lost, but we do repurpose them within the same year. So it helps your neighboring airports recirculate those funds sooner and help them get a better construction season.
Get them all? Yep, here's those dates we were talking about. Please put them on your calendar so you know about them. We don't have so please keep these dates in mind. Any questions about what is expected at these dates at this point? And if you do have a question, we do have to have it on this microphone so that everyone online can hear us as well.
That's not working at all.
So that when we record it, we can
Have you guys seen any concerns with these dates on previous projects? Anything that maybe we're missing as just a general that would be good for the group? Something you'd find useful? Things that we can do better? Just because we put dates up here, if they don't work for the group, we'd like to know, instead of having everybody just try and meet what we assumed was a good plan.
with bid times, like, how long should we try to be getting bid holds on this stuff?
It's a good question. It will depend project to project. If it's a discretionary project, probably the longer the bid hold, the better. Only because for the discretionary money to become available through headquarters, X amount of money has to be carried over through the system. And that's not just our office or our region, that's nationwide. So it's a little bit out of our hands at that point. I think we've got it set up right now that all of our, what we'll call kind of first tier discretionary, let's say for our 40-some million dollars of discretionary that we get, we try to break them into kind of 3 tiers, only from a guesstimate on when funds will become available. So if you're in kind of that first third and your project managers will let you know, bids have to be open by the 1st of April. We're not going to have discretionary funding the 1st of April. We just haven't seen it. It's probably not going to happen. But we need to be in a good position, because if you're on the discretionary list and it comes down the list and hits your project and you don't have bids open, as a region, we are bypassing your project and going on down to the next one that does have bids open. Now, the big kicker here, though, as a detractant, is when you do open your bids, we don't jump back up the list to get there. So really work well in advance to have your bids open, so we have known costs, so that when we're called, we can pick up those projects. We've actually been fairly successful within the state, but also our office, in that we leapfrogged a handful of airports this past year. There were up in the Seattle and Helena offices because they didn't have bids open. So it really is something that we've made a push to from a regional standpoint and have followed through, at least within this past year. Second tier, do you guys remember, was it June 1st? June 1st for bids. Maybe we check it out.
Yeah. And
But this was a little bit of an unusual year because we got money in different months.
Sure. And this is something that your project managers will sit down during your pre-designs, make you well informed, well in advance. So it won't be a surprise. But back to the original question of bid hold, I don't think anything less than 90 days is going to do you much good. Look at your local climate, see what kind of interest you think you'll have. If you already have funding available, if entitlements become available by May and you're opening bids, May 31st, you can probably, go more to a 45 or 60 day bid hold. But if you're opening bids before grants are in hand, which should be most of them, or at least you know what your costs are, I would say at least 90. You'll have to push that envelope a little bit. We always would like to have the longer ones because
with a quick intro and overview of the CIP update process, and then I think Linda's got a little more detail as far as the FAA expectations for the process. As you already heard, the dates for the CIPs, we're going to be opening them right away, and then we expect to have them in hopefully by December 1st. And once again, it's similar to last year. We're going to be doing that through the state's WIM system. So every airport sponsor has access to that. If not, let us know. But you'll log in to WIMS, and that's where you'll interactively update all your CIP data, projects, cost estimates, and any funding expectations. Also in WIMS, there's places for you to attach documents such as exhibits and any cost estimates that may be produced for those projects as well. What we're looking for at a minimum is a 5-year CIP, and that helps us to plan out as far as possible for the needs of the airport and in conjunction with the funding that may be available from ourselves and the FAA. So please take a concerted effort to at least get 5 years, but I'll also add that the more than that you can provide, the better. We want to go out as far as we can, and I'm going to go ahead and also mention that even though we're doing 5 years, you're not going to be able to get into the years of 17 or 18, which are locked as usual the next 2 years because of our inability to react to changing funding expectations that quickly. So once again, you'll be able to go in 19 and beyond and update freely. But if you have any changes, whether they be minor or small, please call us or the ADO and discuss it if you need to make any tweaks to the years 17 or 18, because the WIM system will not allow you to do so. So focusing again on the 5 years, it's going to be 17 through 21. Those are the ones we really want to focus on and make sure we have the best data all around for those 5 years. And I'm going to go ahead and highlight some of the things we would like to emphasize for you all to include at a minimum in those 5 years. And if we go on to the next slide, I've got an overview of what some of those items are. And the first one is going to be the CIP exhibits I mentioned. So CIP exhibits are what are going to show us where your project is located on your airfield. And it gives us an idea of the scope, the location of the project, so that we can kind of try to combine that with any cost estimates as well as any funding that you may have or may need. On the next slide, I have an example of what a CIP exhibit looks like. This is one that's pretty nice, fancy, easy to read, color-coded. So these are examples of what we see in some cases, but I have a few other examples on the next 2 slides to show you that they don't have to be, hired by a consultant to produce these. If you're a smaller airport and you don't have the ability to produce such highly graphical exhibits, black and white, smaller detail is fine. And then even on the next slide, I've got an example of things we have. It's better than nothing if we have an idea of what your project entails as far as scope and location. And so if we back up again to the previous two slides ago, I'll give you an outline again of what I'm going to continue to discuss here. So the cost estimates. These are really important as well because even if you don't have a consultant, once again, that can provide a detailed breakdown of what those quantities may cost in a project, at least do a little research, ask us, talk to other contractors, try to get a ballpark of what your project may entail, and put that in there for, like I said, at least the next 5 years, but the further out, the better. And then another thing we want to emphasize this year is including all project needs at the airport, whether it's likely to be funded or not, or even if it's solely funded locally. We also want to be able to, at least from a state perspective, be able to quantify statewide needs or even statewide investment from the airports themselves on their own. And these are things that we as a state would like to track, not only to help you, but to emphasize the whole state's commitment from an airport perspective in their own airports. And it also allows us the opportunity, if you have an unfunded project, to maybe bring that up if for some reason ourselves or the FAA find ourselves with a little extra money. Who's going to get it? Who needs it? Well, here's a project. Even though it wasn't funded, it's shown. And then the next and final step is once you submit all that to us, we will sit down with the feds over about a 1-month process, beginning in December and through January, to go through all the CIPs statewide and mesh all the needs with the priorities. And then once they're finalized, you'll get a notice from us. And that's a very important time for you to go back and look because we will likely make changes to the CIP to show what funding you can expect from ourselves and the feds. And once again, just as a reminder, this is also the way in which you're submitting your information to the FAA is through our WIM system. Because when we coordinate, they get the data from us that you have provided to the WIM system. I think that's kind of all I had for an overview and intro. Are there any questions on that basic information at this point? If not, we'll hand it over to Linda to go into her side of things.
And now you get really confused. This is, okay. As Scott said, I'm the planner for all 49 Colorado airports that receive federal funds. And as part of those duties, I coordinate the CIP entries into our automated system called SOAR. So after you submit your CIP data to the state, we vet it, the two of us, the two offices together. The WIMS accepts it. So my presentation is going to kind of pick up from there. What happens after that? My goal here is not to spend too much time on policy. Last year my presentation really focused on FAA policies related to CIP, and I managed to confuse you and myself. So I'm trying to do less policy this time and really focus on what we find on CIPs as they're being submitted to us, what works, what doesn't work. In the end, our goal is to develop a CIP that competes really well for funds and that we can support, because we're not the only ones. The ADO is not the only one that makes the decisions on funding. A lot of the funding decisions go up the line to our regional office and to our headquarters. So we need to have certain information to justify those funding decisions. Okay. So again, what happens after you submit your CIP to CDOT? It's vetted with the FAA, it's accepted in WIMS. Well, it goes into a larger system. The individual airport CIPs make up the National Airports Capital Improvement Plan, the ACIP. You're probably only going to ever hear this acronym in this room because it's really something we use internally. But not only is it required for you to get your funds, but it also helps us with our requirements to report to Congress what our national airport development needs are. There's an overall National Airports Plan, the National Plan for Integrated Airport Systems, the NIPIAS acronym there. That's the system that identifies all the airports nationally that are important to our system that we need to put federal funds to. There's criteria to get in there. If you're in this room, generally, you're in the NIPIAS. I think we have one or two are just state airports. Not that you're not important, but you just didn't meet certain criteria to get into the federal funding process. Well, as part of that NIPIAS plan, we're required to give reports to Congress. And they want to know what our national needs are. And that's what your CIP does. Maybe the CIP is our best shot. We don't get it funded at all, but it does identify all of our development needs and to Congress, so when they make their funding decisions, at least they're well informed. It doesn't say we always get we never get all what we need, but at least they're well informed. Okay. The last bullet there is about our order that talks about our national program to collect individual airport CIPs and make an overreaching national CIP. If you really want to get into it, you can read it, but that's typically something the FAA uses. But that really establishes the requirements for CIP. But simply put, if you want AIP funds, you're going to submit us a CIP. And it's an annual submission. It is, as Todd said, Scott, collected, our national publications say 3 to 5 years. The DIM radio, at a minimum, you need to submit 5 years. I will take any years that you'll give me, okay? My philosophy is, and right now our system is allowing me to enter projects through 2029. My philosophy is the earlier we get it in and we identify funding or any problems we have, the better, because we can start planning and working out a good plan for you. For non-primary airports, that's generally your GA airports, this is very important that you keep a minimum of 5 years in our system. Every 2 years, the FAA takes a picture of our automated system of what the status of the CIPs are for non-primary airports. We call it a snapshot. And you'll see that term throughout my presentation. That snapshot establishes the needs at those non-primary airports. And if you don't have $750,000 worth of development needs over a 5-year period, your entitlements could be reduced. And I don't think that's a well-known fact. And I always monitor it. Our program managers we already monitor, if suddenly we're dropping below that 750 mark for the 5 years, or 750,000, we're going to be calling you, saying, hey, you don't have enough projects identified, let's work on this, and we want to keep you at $150,000 entitlement level every year. Oh, wanted to mention SOAR. That's an acronym we throw around a lot when we're talking to you about CIPs. That stands for System of Airports Reporting. It's our antiquated automated system that Kevin's been working diligently on to get it updated with the national group. It's where we put all your planning information. That's where your CIP goes in. It's monitored at a regional and headquarters level, so it's just not seen by us, but it does several things for us. It assigns priority ranking, which I'll talk about in a minute. Then it links into the grant. When you're ready to go to grant, we assign funds, and so it's a very important system and tool for how we manage your CIP and your grants. Eventually, the hope is that when you enter your CIP into WIMS, it'll talk to our system. As it stands today, it does not, and I have to manually enter your CIPs. So you owe me lunch for that. Okay, this is just a graphic representation of the process at the federal level. It kind of marries what, through the 5-year process, what we're thinking about funding and our schedule. You know, out the 5 years, it's big picture. We're dumping all the projects in. We're looking at our funding needs, and as we get down into year 3, and also that I mentioned the 2-year snapshot for the non-primaries, the GA airports. That's why you need to put all you can in your CIP to make sure that you're getting the funding level to justify your annual entitlements. But as we get closer to your project, you know, the funnel gets more narrow. We're getting more specific on the project, more information, schedules, diagrams. We're identifying what we can fund. Our funds are limited. We love airports. Let me get that straight right now. We wish we could fund everything. We hate saying no, but the reality is we have a limited amount of funds. And that really comes into play in the final year when you're going the year 1 funding, the current year funding, what are available funds and what project we're going to go ahead with. Okay, available funds. We harp on this all the time, and so I need to give it some attention. Even though we've reported to Congress all of our national needs for our NIPIAS airports, we never get what we want. And I went into the latest annual, I guess it's every other year, report to Congress. And nationally, our needs are about $6.7 billion. We were just authorized for, what, $3.5 billion. That's pretty common. We get about half of what we need. More specifically, or locally, Colorado has reported about $118 million worth of needs. And we only, last year, got $80 million in grant, and that's both discretionary and entitlements. So, again, there's a gap there. We'll do our best to fill that gap, but sometimes we can't make it. We're going to look for other funding sources, local funding sources, other grant programs. Perhaps we just have to delay the project. Okay. So, this is why we have a CIP process, to make sure our local funding gets used for the highest priority work, and we get the best, or the most we can for the dollars spent. Oh, and back to this $118 million. When you're reporting to the WIMS, there's a place that you can put kind of your wish list. You know you're not going to have any funding, but it's justified eligible work. Please include that, because sometimes I think we underreport a little bit because we're only putting on there projects that we know are AIP eligible and possibly get funds. Try to report all of our needs if you can. And what doesn't get captured there are the projects that aren't AIP eligible. We know that the airports have greater needs than this, but we can only report to Congress what's AIP eligible.
And that wish list she's talking about, that is the long-term NIPIAS.
Yes.
So that is the very bottom of that CIP that goes out beyond the years. So that's
Yeah,
what we put in those years.
Thank you. And if I think, it's AIP eligible and it's reasonable, I'm not going to put in long-term for a GA airport with 10-based aircraft a third parallel runway. It just doesn't make sense, right? But if it's reasonable and AIP eligible, I will enter into what I call your wish list. We call it overall development objectives, ODOs. So one you need to know. But anyway, I will get it reported in there. Okay. Last year I dwelled a lot on CIP schedule, and this really confuses people because we're not dealing with the current fiscal year, right? The first 2 years are locked, and we're starting with the third year. So, and just explain that just confuses it. So I try to simplify it to just when you need to be involved where. In October, as Todd went over, you're beginning to submit your CIPs to WIMS, and you're doing that for both CDOT and for FAA. We work together as a partner on that. And that we did several years ago because you were making 2 CIP submissions, and that just didn't make sense. So we're trying to be a little more organized and make it into a single submission. December CIPs are due. And the reason that is if they're going to be taking, and I say they, the big they, the FAA headquarters is taking its snapshot into January to determine funding levels for our non-primary airports. We need some time, the 2 offices, to meet and go over our 49 airport CIPs. It's about a 3 or 4 day marathon to go through them. So again, any information you can submit with diagrams, explanations, so we're not having to get you on the phone and we can move quickly through that process. We would greatly appreciate it. Okay, so by January we figured out what makes sense for our project. Again, it's usually the first 2 years are locked unless some emergency has come up. And every other year the snapshot is done for the non-primary GA airports. And really, you get notified that WIMS has accepted the CIP. From your local level, you're pretty much done. The rest of this March, May, and June, and now your CIP is feeding into that federal system that I was telling you about before. It goes to our regions. We start planning out, because we're in fiscal year 17, we'll start, that's finalized. 18, we're just putting the finishing touches on. We're beginning to discuss fiscal year 19 right now in this coming March period. It gets vetted and organized with our region. We're part of 7 states. So we work out a plan for our 3 states. It gets pushed up the line to the region. Our manager, John Bauer, goes to battle with the other states and hopefully will compete well for the limited amount of funds that are allocated to our region. At that point, it moves up to the national level in June. So by middle summer, they're closing in on the final plan that they like to see in place and that we stick to as best as we can. Okay, that's all I'm going to talk about schedule. All right, before I get into the specifics on how to create a CIP that's smart and allows you to compete well for funds, I'm going to talk about funding types because we see that as a common problem as we get the program. You can carry over up to 3 years for non-primaries, up to 2 years for primary airports. You can't do that with discretionary funds. All right, they do have an expiration date, as you all know. We will help you monitor it, but that's one of the common mistakes we see. Someone has recovered funds from an older grant or were to carry over 2 or 3 years ago into a big project and whoop, they expire that year. So we will always encourage you and prompt you to use your oldest funds first. We may put it into a design fund and get your newer entitlements into the actual construction project. So it's a little scheme that, well, not scheme, but strategy we'll use to make sure those funds don't expire. Another pot of money and that comes from the entitlement side is state apportionment funds. Once during the year we've been allocated AIP fund and we meet all our entitlement obligations, whatever's left in the entitlement pot goes to states. In Colorado, it's about $5.6 million a year. Is that right? Yes. And typically it is, well, it's always been, as long as I've been at the ADO, 10 years, used for non-primary airports. Because they have smaller pots of entitlement funds, we try to get to runway projects at least once every, 18 to 20 years, depending on the condition of the runway. Those are big, costly projects, so we only allow the non-primary airports to compete for those state apportionment funds. Your primary airport, this pot of money out of the Denver area is not available to you. Discretionary funds. All right. Once we've done everything with our entitlement funds, what's left over in the AIP program is going to be in discretionary funds. They do have a lot of rules with them, so they're not as discretionary as you think for the FAA. I don't know. They vary every year because we have to meet our prior year commitments on carryovers. So years we have a lot, some we don't. Also, the term grant management. I borrowed this slide from one of my coworkers in Montana, and I think that's a good point that he makes about grant management. We have big projects throughout the country that we've been assigning funds for and getting ready for it. Here comes July, August, and the contractor falls out or something falls apart. or they were slow to get all the requirements done for that we need to issue the grant. Suddenly those funds become available. And we typically call those late year funds. And the agency has to get those out again, or they go into the general U.S. fund. We don't want that to happen. That's why we're so diligent about making sure we have solid CIPs, because we can use those year-end funds for projects identified on an existing CIP. We're not making up projects late minute. So we can often take advantage of poor grant management in other regions for our projects, because we do a really great job with having projects ready to go. Typically discretionary funds, because they are very limited and their amounts vary from year to year, will only go for high priority runway and safety projects at primary airports. Projects at primary airports take the bulk of our funds. They're big projects where their facilities have to comply with much more demanding requirements. They have longer and wider runways. They have more nav aids, lights, whatever, and they are used more heavily by the users of the systems, primarily the people who fund the AIP system, commercial passengers on air carriers. So they tend to be our high priority. That doesn't mean GA airports can't compete for discretionary funds, because they do. It's just you've got to realize on the list you're going to be competing with the primary airports, the big runways. Outside runways, we rarely see taxiways, we rarely see ramps, occasionally a safety piece of equipment, but really our discretionary funds, because we have so few of them, are focused on runways at primary airports. All right, and that's why the next two bullets are why for this year and next year are locked in our CIPs. It takes so much coordination amongst the system. You're part of a larger system. If we've got to fund a big project at your airport this year, it trickles through the system, because it may delay funding a big project at another airport within Colorado, Utah, or Wyoming, or within our region. So once we get those in place, pieces in place, we don't like to pull them out and change things every year. It takes a lot of effort, especially justify for discretionary funds. That's why those this year and the next year are locked, and we really try to stick to that as best we can. All right. You'll hear us refer to the discretionary candidate list. I think, Mark, you touched on this, if I remember right. It's a secret list we have in the office. No. It is a list we keep because we are planning 2 years in advance. We have to know out 2 years ahead of time what our big projects are going to be. We're going to rank them on priority. And here size does matter. If you're a big airport serving a lot of air carrier, you get ranked a little bit higher for your runway work. And we get a ceiling every year within our ADO, and that's 2 or 3 years out. We're estimating what the discretionary funds, of course that's going to vary, as I told you, because we don't know from year to year what discretionary funds we're going to have. But it's a good guess, and so far I think we've been fairly close to it. We have really good financial people who figure this out for us. So this is what we had last year, $86 million for all our projects. Our needs far exceeded that. So we had to sit down as an office and figure out, and with CDOT, what of those projects we're going to get the funds. If they didn't get the funds, we kind of put them into a category of, if we get year-end funds, we'll try to get them, and then it starts getting bumped out to the next year. It's vetted through our office. Then again, it has to go up to the region, where it's vetted against high-priority projects in the other states. We come up with a list of how we want to fund projects and in what order, and then headquarters has to sign off, because so it has a lot of eyes looking at it. A common mistake about discretionary funds. Oh yeah, because there's an impression when I said there's a lot of eyes on it that we're picking pet projects or favorite airport managers and giving them discretion, and appropriates the fund, because those are two different things. We're authorized the program, and then we have to wait for the money to be appropriated to spend it. Once we get to appropriation, the first 3 issues or items have to be funded. Mainly, you have to pay my salary. AIP funds fund FAA's airports office, plus a couple of nav aids folks as well. But the administration of the program gets funded out of the AIP. Then by statute, we have some research programs that need to be funded. And the one thing I thought had died, and now is still there, I've checked the DOT website, there is a small community air service development grant program that we fund out of AIP. I don't know a lot about it, but if you serve air carriers or want to serve air carriers, I would suggest you go to DOT's webpage and see if there's a possibility this is another funding source for you. I don't know what their criteria is, so I just need to just go to that webpage and take a look there. Anyway, so that in itself takes $137 million of AIP funds right off the top. Next comes entitlement funds, again because we're by statute obligated to issue these to primary airports based on the number of passengers they serve, to cargo airports, to non-primary, which is generally GA airports, and they get a set amount of the 150. And whatever carryovers we have from prior years, we have an obligation to fulfill those carryover amounts. Now, one question I get a lot is about cargo airports. A lot of your airports, you get cargo. Why can't you get in cargo entitlement funds? Because the rules require that the cargo that's only counted be on cargo-only aircraft, and you must exceed 100,000 pounds of cargo a year to even get to the point you'd be considered for entitlement. Right now in the state, we only have 2 airports that do that, is Denver and Colorado Springs, and it doesn't really add up to a whole lot. So most of you wouldn't qualify for cargo entitlements. Okay, once we've done all that, funded all that, that's $2.6 billion. That's the bulk of our program. Whatever's left over goes into discretionary. And last year it was about $700 million for 3,500 NIPIS airports. So somebody pointed out, in fact, it was David at Longmont. Is he here today? Yeah, you can thank him from this slide, because he brought up the point, and it was a good point, of saying, well, yeah, you give out discretionary funds, but there's some rules you have to follow in the way you give these funds out, and they're called set-asides. And so much of the program has to go to noise or reliever airports or projects that are specifically for safety, security, capacity. Well, those are national goals, so you can't come in and say, hey, I want my 35% for this noise project, right? It doesn't work that way. These are national goals that we fulfill normally through our planning process just because of our emphasis on safety and security, but they are there if they ever pop up and you're wondering what they're all about. In the 10 years of the ADO, only noise projects, as a region, we weren't really able to meet our goal, and I was able to call an airport and shift their noise project around to another year to help us out, and they were willing to work with us. And that's because our region just doesn't have a lot of noise issue like the airports on either coast. They tend to gobble up most of our noise money. Military airport program, that's the conversion of old military bases to civilian use. We don't have any of the states, it doesn't really apply to us. Now we do have a couple reliever airports, Centennial and Rocky Mountain Metro, who do compete for additional discretionary funds because they meet certain criteria. You have to have over 100 based aircraft, runways longer than 5,000 foot, and more than 75,000 operations. So they get a little bump there because of that. Okay. CIP development. Now to the heart of the discussion here is what can we do so you develop a smart CIP that competes well for funds and that we in the ADO can support up the line. Well, first of all, you can't just throw any project you want in there, right? It has to be identified and justified in your master plan, and it has to be shown on your FAA-approved ALP. If it's not there, we're not discussing the project. We can discuss how to get it on through your planning process, but it has to be vetted through the planning process. Again, as I'm talking about the different types of fund, as you go down, just don't assume all your funding gaps will be filled with this magic pot of discretionary funds. Remember the discussion we had about discretionary entitlements and when they can be used and when they can't be used. Eligibility versus justification. This is a difficult one, particularly in recent years since we published our AIP handbook, our newest version of it. We used to think if it was AIP eligible, okay, we'll get on a list and see how we go. But now there's certain projects that need to be justified. A good one is the crosswind runways. If you don't meet your wind coverage, do I need to speed up?
Oh, no.
Okay. If you don't meet your wind coverage, it seems like you would automatically be eligible for crosswind runway. Well, maybe I would agree in some cases, but again, if you only have 10 based aircraft, 10,000 operations, your capacity may not be justified. So we're going to have that discussion with you to see if your project is not only eligible but justified. Primary versus non-primary. Again, they compete for different funds, so figure out what category your airport is and be realistic with you're not playing with the big boys if you're a small GA airport. Doesn't mean we're not important to the system. We don't help you fund. You're going to compete for different funding. National ranking. You hear us say, hey, you know, that's a good project, but it just doesn't compete well in our ranking process. And this is why. When I enter your projects into our automated system SOAR, it is automatically assigned a national priority ranking number. Again, the bigger you are, the better it is. The more air carrier services passengers you serve, the higher ranking. Also the type of project. Generally, if you start at the runway, that project's going to have higher priority, and as the further you move away from the runway, that lower priority it is. It is not something I control. It's based on a formula that's inputted in an automated system, and it's automatically assigned that number. So 100 is the highest. And on our discretionary candidate list, you're rarely going to see a project that's not above 70, right? You're not going to see terminal work that's down in the 30s. I've never seen terminal work on our discretionary candidate list. Doesn't mean it won't happen, but so far it hasn't. But it is not the only thing we use. We certainly are going to take into consideration local circumstances. You know, maybe there's some environmental issues that need to be considered that make this a more important project, or there's state and local priorities. But it is a tool that we use, and we reference it pretty frequently in our CIP discussions. Okay, so here's some other items we need to talk about when developing CIP. Most of these items should be vetted through your master plan process, and you should already identify them as going to be an issue when you start developing your CIP. For whatever reason, they tend to get overlooked. In fact, if you have a complex environmental process that's coming up, you need to acquire land, often it's a timing issue. You've decided to do the project in a couple of years, but actually you need 5 years to get all this work done. So be mindful of these issues and kind of use this as a checklist. A lot of times we see nav aids. Impact on your project, maybe you have to move a nav aid. You have to do a reimbursable agreement if it's an FAO nav aid. Whoops, that's going to take you a little bit. Okay. Down here, schedule again. SMS is our safety management review system. Sometimes the agency feels like the safety impacts the project needs further analysis, and we'll call together a review panel on that. It takes time. If you do certain projects over a certain amount, you're required to do a benefit cost analysis. That takes additional time. Okay. Other items that you need to consider: ensure the project fits within the larger project. If you have a multi-year large project and we're got it all planned for CIP, don't surprise us in October with suddenly popping up that you need to take some of your entitled funds to pay of a taxi lane or a lower priority work. You need to stick with the plan in these larger projects. Don't pull those surprises on us. Make your funding requests reasonable. Again, if you're wanting to, say, pave your ramp and you're in a non-primary airport, you're not going to compete with discretionary funds. That is one of the biggest mistakes we see is we get these great master plans, a wonderful CIP, but then there's a funding gap, a large funding gap. So sponsors and consultants just quickly go, oh, put it in the discretionary column, let FAA work out. I'm going to be calling you about that because that's not a good strategy. It will not help you compete for federal funds you need to. There's probably a better way we can approach it, especially smaller airports. You're allowed to transfer your funds amongst other smaller airports. Maybe we can group those funds. Maybe you can do carryover. And so if you're willing to bring to the table some funds, if you put some skin in the game and say, hey, well, this 1 year, our community will rally and get us $800,000 to this project, we might consider trying to get you on the discretionary list. We may not get you much, but at least it opens the conversation up that we can consider it. Okay. Early coordination, I think, goes without saying. Consistency for large projects, no significant changes. That's the problem with large projects. We get going down the road, we spend years getting the funding all lined up, and then suddenly we have changes. Changes are never good. Try to be as consistent because it's hard for us to get last minute money. We're a slow moving beast when it comes to funding, and we should be. We're dealing with public funds that need a lot of eyes to look at it, so there's a lot of vetting that goes on in the process, and it takes time. Okay. Again, use entitlements for high ranking. Okay. Another problem we see come in is when you do get on the discretionary candidate list, you're getting a big chunk of discretionary from us. Then you assign to your CIP your entitlement funds for a completely different project. Seems logical, right? You're thinking you're getting more work for your money. We can't allow that. Our rules require that if you're getting a big chunk of discretionary funds, you will assign your available entitlement funds to that project. Okay. I already talked about the differences between non-primary and primary airports, watching your age of entitlements. Okay, be an advocate for your airport. Communicate with us. As much as we'd like to know all about your local airport, except for DIA when it hits our local news, we're not going to know when your air carrier service changes. If you had a national disaster or emergency, let us know. Just don't suddenly surprise us when you send your CIP in October. We need to know ongoing. If you have a big project coming up, say your terminal building suddenly has gotten too small, you've got all these air carriers coming in. I'd love to monitor that as a state, but we don't. We just don't have the time. So please give us a call. We'll meet with you anytime. Send us emails, press releases. Once we know about, we can start adjusting your CIP to get you ready for the changes you need to do at your airport. Okay. And these are just the opportunities and suggestions for when you can meet with us. Okay. Real quick, and then I'll be done. I've come up with some sample CIPs at some fictitious airports. And I put Metro Airport. That is not Rocky Mountain Metro. That's just a fictitious airport. These are non-hub primary airports. They get an entitlement of $1.2 million a year. They don't collect PFCs. And they all get 90% federal share. And all these projects have been vetted. They're justifiable and they're eligible. And I've included our national priority ranking. You know, the reconstruct runway is 70. It's pretty high up. And our terminal expansion is 31. Just looking at it real quick, can you tell me whether Acme, who's the airport on top, or Metro Bond, who's going to get our support? Who has a better chance of competing for these funds? Can you all read it back there? Is that too small? Okay, I'll go over it real quick then. So Acme has carried over its entitlements, right, because they get 1.2 million a year, so they've carried over 1 year. They're asking for 5.7 million discretionary. They're asking CDOT for 250,000, and they're going beyond local match. They put some more money in to make up the difference. For their lower rating terminal work, they haven't even asked for anything. They're going to fund it locally. That's a pretty good plan to us. And maybe this 2 million is not realistic if it's a small community, but at least they're identified that it's not something that can compete for our funds, and maybe we can get it in a couple years with entitlements or coming up with another funding project. This gets our attention and we support this. However, the one on the bottom is the one we see the most. We have no carryover. We're just using this year's entitlement. It's assigned to discretionary funds that are low priority, not to the higher priority discretionary funds. We're asking for discretionary fund for a low priority work when we have already asked it for high priority. We're asking for CDOT overmatch, which they're not doing right now. So you have to be aware of what CDOT's funding realities are. And past years they might do it, but they can't do it. And they're doing the bare minimum of local match. We would reject the CIP and go back to the sponsor and work with them. So, all right, that was a lot I threw at you.
And I'll kind of wrap up from our perspective, because she mentioned CDOT funding, and you heard a lot about federal funding and eligibility in Linda's presentation, but we expect to give you guys a little more insight into our situation towards the end of the agenda today. So I won't go into that now, but also, you know, in summary, we do want to help airports, so help us help you. Give us the best information you can for CIPs. Give us as much information as you can, including exhibits, cost estimates, and at least 5 years.
And if you need help putting this together, so Linda, you threw too much at me today and I'm really confused, call me. I'll get with the project manager and we'll sit down and say, okay, these projects make sense. Here's how you're going to best compete for these funds, and we'll help you develop a CIP. And I offer that to the consultants too, because I think sometimes it overwhelms them, and that's when they tend to go down the discretionary path and just quickly throw $10 million discretionary at projects that would never compete for it.
And one thing I was reminded to ask is, even if you provide cost estimates in the past, update previous ones you may have supplied as well, so that they're more accurate and more correct.
Yep.
And then that's all we had. If
Yes,
you
too much.
have any questions about anything we've discussed in CIPs? Yes, sir.
So you mentioned about not changing up any kind of long-term construction programs or big construction projects that kind of been vetted through before. I guess realistically, sometimes things change. How much extra time do you need, or do you like to see if, say, there's a project 3-4 years down the road, that all of a sudden today there might be some changes?
As soon as you know, call us.
Okay.
Is that fair, Kevin? Yeah. Because suddenly we need another another $1 million. 3 or 4 years down the road, we can probably accommodate it. If we're middle of the current grant year, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, and that's one of our biggest problems is a lot of times we get something in the CIP 5 years out. Then we sit on that same number, the same scope, and we get the year of the project, and all of a sudden the estimate is way out of date, and we have some accessory stuff that we need in the scope. So if we continue to update that through the 5-year process, it'll really help us.
No, I'm just looking for a timeline so that I can, I can start telling people this is when it needs to be finalized and solidified. No changing.
Current fiscal year, I definitely.
Okay.
Because like I said, it is hard for us to make change once we're in a fiscal year.
So it'd be safe to say, just tell them 1 year ahead of time. That's it. That's when you really need a hard.
Yes, and always keep your estimates up to date at all times.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
So next, I think we're going to welcome Kevin and Caitlin.
Yes.
And they're going to talk about grant drawdowns and reimbursements, and then I think after that we'll have time for a short break.
I'm going to go first so I can go get our lunch. And there is if you drove a white Jeep with the license plate QTW732, your lights are on. It's parked in the grass. So if that is you, please go turn your lights off, or we'll have the airport.
Winner.
Okay. Salida is going to eat first.
The walk of shame.
I want to talk about the eligibility of Jumpstart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No money for you, Zach. Sorry. If you are in this room and you do not know what WIMS is, please raise your hand. Unless you're a Metro student, then you don't need to worry about it yet. But if you do, that's fantastic. WIMS is the state system. WIMS stands for Web-Based Information Management System. You would do your grants in there. You'll do your application, your drawdown, your closeout. CIPs are in there. Crackville, a lot of the other statewide programs we're starting to add in there. If you do not have a login for WIMS and you need one, contact your state planner, Todd, Scott, or myself, and we will get you set up with that. We also do some fuel tax stuff in WIMS as well. We use it for a lot of things, and we're trying to use it for more and more every day. So familiarize yourself with WIMS. When you submit your drawdowns in WIMS, unlike your CIPs, you have to submit them to us and you have to submit them to the FAA. So there are some differences between the two. Kevin and I will talk about some of those differences. The one thing we need attached to every drawdown that is submitted is your backup. So you can't just say, I need $1,000 and that's it. You need to submit your backup. That includes the federal RFR if it's a federal match project, the invoices that are associated with it, and if you have 3 or more invoices, we would like a summary sheet. Some of us are more sticklers on that than others, myself being the worst. If you don't have a summary sheet and you have more than 3 invoices, I'm going to reject your drawdown and you'll have to do it again. It's not a hard thing to do, just a very simple Excel spreadsheet that shows the payee, the date of the invoice, the dates that the work was done, if that's possible, and the total. After you have all of them, then from the total, that's where you'll do your breakdown for state, federal, and local, not on each invoice. If you have lots and lots of them, the summary sheet makes it much, much easier. Even 3 or more, your drawdown will be approved a lot faster if you have a summary sheet, and it makes it easier for us, and then our 2nd and 3rd level reviews as well in the office. Any questions on summary sheets? People are getting much, much better about them, and they don't have to be fancy, they just have to have very simple information on them. But it does make it a lot easier on us. For drawdown timing, I know some of you like to wait the entire project before you claim anything. Some of you want to do it more often for cash flow purposes. You can still do it however you want. We would just like to know what your plan is for each project so that we can plan accordingly with our forecasting. If you're going to wait the whole time and it's a 3-year project, please just let us know. Good for you for being able to do that too. If you're going to claim every 2 weeks or once a month or quarterly, those things are great. That is for federal match projects, state and local projects, which currently there aren't any of, and intern projects as well. Some people want to pay their whole intern at once, or at least claim from us. Some do it quarterly, same thing, some monthly. Let's see. Accruals. Accruals kind of bite us every year, they surprise us, but they are a necessary evil that we can't get away from. So, middle of May, you're going to get an email from the state asking for your accruals. We need all work done prior to June 30th, not invoiced, but work done prior to June 30th. We need an estimate from the airport. Can't come from the consultant, it has to come from the airport. Obviously, a lot of that information sometimes will come from the consultant, but the email to us needs to come from the state. So if you would just be prepared for that. And then we'll get them paid out. Obviously, you can claim them after the first of the fiscal year, which for us is July 1st, but we need the accruals prior to that for our accounting system. Try to be as accurate as you can on your estimates, because if it's way off, they come back and ask us, what in the world did you do? Any questions? Anybody sleeping? Okay. All right. No questions? Perfect. Okay. I'll go get our lunch. Yay.
Cool. Well, a lot of what Caitlin just said kind of parallels with us. So our Delphi e-invoicing, which we've been now using for at least a few years, we know it's not the perfect system. It's a DOT-wide system, so FAA actually has very little control over it. But I think it's getting better. A couple of things, it seemed like before every 3 months we changed the rules. This year we basically didn't change anything. So it's gotten a lot better. We've gotten a lot more consistent with what we're getting from you guys. We're getting a lot of payments, accepted first time. We are still reviewing every payment, so there's no automatic payments. We're doing it manually. A couple of things, we still do want to use pennies. So all the way through your grant, when you're submitting your invoices, just put in the exact amount down to the pennies. Up until the last one, that's where it gets confusing. On the final payment, we want it to be a round dollar so that when we're recovering funds, assuming you don't use every cent, but when we're recovering funds, we like that to be in dollars so we don't have to track pennies throughout the whole system and do all that. So pennies all the way through until the very last payment is still the rule. Nothing has changed in how we do payments for the end of the grant. So you can withdraw funds or request funds up to 90% until you have substantial completion. Once we can prove the substantial completion, test results, we've done final inspection, those type of things, then we can go to that 97.5 level. And that last 2.5% is basically the carrot that we like to keep that keeps the project from sitting and gets us into the closeout process so that we could get through that last little bit. So 90%, and then once substantial completion, you can go to 97.5, and then the last 2.5% would be when everything is complete and we have final report, all that fun stuff. As far as attachments go, exactly what Caitlin was saying would be perfect for us, the invoices with a summary when it gets to be too many. We have in the past, because our system does have trouble sometimes sponsors would call us and say, I can't get it to accept these attachments. Can I just send them to you in an email and you can review them and accept the payment? We actually now have a national report, so every one that we've done that, we've been dinged on how to justify it and do all that. So we won't be doing that anymore. So if you submit a payment without attachments, even if you've submitted it 3 times with the same 150-page attachments, we've had to reject it for other reasons, we'll have to ask you to upload them again. One of the big things to us is burn rate, because we are nationally rated on it, and it goes to the performance of our office. So when we get late year discretionary, things like that, they look at the performance of our office. So for CDOT grants, you can sit and wait until the end, until you're done to request those funds. For us, we'd like to see it much more periodically. For the bigger construction jobs, at least monthly, and just keep the grant moving. We actually also, other than burn rate, we have 9 months now. So if your grant hasn't had a payment in 9 months, it's considered inactive, and we're reporting to headquarters why we have funds sitting out there that are so unneeded that we haven't even touched them in 9 months. So just keep the payments coming. It's good for everybody, I think, to keep the money moving. Nothing has changed on new users, so if you have somebody else that you need access to Delphi, just email me directly, and I'll get it put into the system. All I need is a phone number and an email and the request, and we can get that person moving in the system. It does take a little bit of time to get through the process, but that's gotten quicker too. Just a couple more things. So end of year reporting is now. Our fiscal year just ended. So I know that I think my sponsors got an email from me. But basically what we're requesting, there's two different forms. There's standard form 425, and that is required for any grant that was open during the fiscal year. So even if you closed your grant last October 2nd, you'll have to report that form for that grant. And then the other one is the sponsor quarterly reports. So those are done quarterly. Basically what that does is it updates us on how much progress has been made on the grant. For the construction jobs, we actually have weekly reports that can take the place of that. So if you're doing weeklies for the construction job, you don't need to do the quarterly report. But as soon as you're done with construction, until the grant is closed, you would have to do the quarterly reports because you wouldn't be doing the weeklies anymore. So it gets a little confusing, but those are due before the end of the calendar year. So you have 3 months to get them done from now. The quarterly reports, we had some questions for planning, environmental, and equipment grants. Those are still required. So, I mean, it doesn't really make so for an equipment grant. It's probably going to be 0% up until you acquire it, and then it'll be 100% for the rest of the time. But for planning and environmental, those type of things, we still want to keep an eye on the progress of the grant. Any questions on any of that stuff? I know it's been an issue. The last one was the SAM registration, and basically all we wanted to let you know on that is that please keep it updated. I think you get emails when it's about to expire. We don't see any of that unless we manually log in and check each of our airports, which doesn't happen very often. The only time we see it is when you let it expire. And actually what they do is they put a headquarters hold on, so we find out that you can no longer get payments on your grants, you can no longer receive grants, those type of things. So it's from what I hear, I've never had to do it, but a pretty easy process, so just make sure we keep those up to date. And that's all we had.
Did you talk about rounding?
Let's talk about rounding.
Payment request?
Pennies and...
I still have people who keep rounding up.
Okay. Definitely don't round up. So, all the way through, don't round it off. Just keep the pennies in. It's much easier. And then on that last payment, we need to, it's rounding down, it's truncating, however you want to say it, but basically make it a whole dollar to that final one, but definitely don't have it be larger than the original penny. So if you were owed $800.92 on the whole grant, on that last payment, make it for $800. We'll be good to go. That work?
One comment on the Delphi password. You used to get an email stating your password is going to expire. They have quit doing that. So your password just expires without you knowing, and it is a process to get it reset. So just a heads up.
And when they haven't done a payment for a certain amount of time, it takes them off of access. So it's good from an auditing standpoint, but it's really a pain if you aren't doing payments regularly. Sir?
If someone leaves an airport, do they need to do anything to deactivate their users for either?
If they let me know, I can do it. I think it does by the course of the 60 days. I think we've used that, but I recently found out that so let me know just in the email. And usually when somebody leaves, you're also adding somebody, so you can do it in the same email. Say, this is the person that we're trying to add. This is the person. Any other questions? I think we get a break after this.
Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll try to start by 10:45. Give everybody a chance to stretch.
Talk about, but they're all fairly short. First one, I'm Ron Neoff with the FAA. I'm the project manager for the southern third of the state. So first one is our contract management contracts. I think everybody's aware that we are no longer approving the lump sum contract for the field engineering for the construction services. We are looking at a cost plus, a not to exceed cost with a fixed fee on those. I think most everybody has been submitting those appropriately, but what we've seen recently is after you go through all the effort to do your fee breakdown and determine what your fixed fee is, when you submit the contract, you're putting all the numbers back together into one item. So keep your fixed fee broken out as a separate line item in your contract. Your other items will be paid for as their, such as field engineering. It's paid for as the hours worked, but your fixed fee is fixed and you'll get that paid. The other thing is that fixed fee is based upon your labor cost. It is a negotiated amount with the sponsor. Technically, it is not a percentage of your cost because percentage of cost is not allowed by the FAA's AC. So it is actually a negotiated amount. And the fixed fee does not include your direct labor, your direct expenses. So direct expenses are not included in the fixed fee. They're included in your fee, in your costs, but they're not part of what you figure your fixed fee on. Okay, the other item, any questions on that real quick? And you can certainly call us and talk to us about it as you go through the fee negotiations and everything. So, the GIS system, the airport's GIS system, it's been around for several years. The 5300-18B, they had come out with an 18 fee, and everybody got real confused about it. They have since rescinded 18C, so 18B is the AC that you want to follow for your AGIS. We've been seeing that people are thinking that the AGIS is just an as-built issue. It is not. When you do your AGIS, it's got to be submitted through the system under the design program. Particularly we have safety critical issues, runway projects or nav aids or whatnot. Flight procedure needs to see that data up front in case they have to do a new flight procedure on it. So you have to submit that information through the design and not just wait till the as-built. When you do the as-built, that still has to be submitted. It should be actual as-built of the project and not construction notes. So that may be, if you're not including that as part of your fees, you probably need to do that as an as-built survey for the end of the project. We are required to make sure that the AGIS module has been completed and bought off by NGS before we close the project. Sometimes that could take several months for NGS to get that done. So once we get the project finished, it behooves you to get all of that data into the AGIS system as soon as possible so that we can start the clock on NGS. Any questions there? DDEs. We have got a new DDE compliance officer. Her name is Sonia Cruz. She started a couple months ago. At this point, there's still a lot of confusion and questions on what's going on with the DDEs. They're kind of changing some of their procedures on it. We do still have to do triennial goals there, 3-year goals. And I noticed that a lot of people have already submitted things to her. I don't know if you're getting those back, if you're getting answers back or not. There's a program called DBE Connects that they are promoting. It's been out there for a while. It used to be the year-end reporting system. Now they're expanding it to include the annual goal that's submitted and approved. We don't have access to it at this point, and we're not sure exactly everything that's included in it. But keep contacting her, visit with her as you need to, visit with us. We'll keep you informed as we know something more as this DBE Connects gets more online. The goals are supposed to be submitted by August 1st, which we've done past all of that. So hopefully everybody that needs goals for 17, 18, or 19 are working those and are getting them submitted. If you have questions, you can call her, you can call us. We'll let you know what we know about when you need goals and which projects. Again, DB goals are based on a grant of $250,000 or more. It includes construction grants, it includes planning grants, and it includes land grants. But for planning and land grants, it's primarily the professional services portion of that, such as land would be appraisals or surveys or that sort of thing, not the actual purchase of the land. Questions? Okay, the next one is our PCN reporting, which is the payment condition number. The advisory circular 5335-5C was published on August of 15. It requires all airports with runways of 12,500 pounds or more to submit PCN numbers. Primary airports were supposed to submit them within 1 year of the date of publication. Everybody else are due now. If you haven't figured your PCNs, please get them done and submit them to us. They do go into a database and they do go through headquarters. Crosswind runways, secondary runways. That's an interesting one because, like Linda had mentioned earlier, with our new published handbook, there's some new guidelines on how we can look at the accuracy. It's talking about the accuracy of your survey. If you've got AGIS survey done and you've done it, you've used the facts and facts as your primary control, you should be seeing an accuracy of A. You should be listing that as A. It defaults to a D, and the D accuracy basically tells flight procedure, flight service that it's a lower quality, lower priority project, and so they don't look at it quite as quickly as they will if it's an A accuracy. So look at that when you do it and try to make it the correct accuracy. We'll get those approved quicker through the other lines of businesses. And my last item really is GPS circling approaches. They do consider GPS circling approaches as a non-precision approach. So when we do your master plans, when you do your AOP updates, consider that as you look at it and be sure you get that put in there. And if you have questions, talk to us, talk to Linda, and we will figure it out. Any questions on any of it?
I have one.
Yes.
We just got our AGIS survey done,
Mm-hmm.
and I've got a bunch of people asking me whether or not that makes us eligible for LPV, the lower L approaches, and how do we get the process started to get our approaches rewritten for the lower minimums?
It's a good question. We'll have to basically get it submitted through AGIS, and I don't know how flight procedures will look at it and determine it. And I think we'll just have to visit with the office and talk to them directly on it. I don't know that just because you've done the AGIS survey, it automatically gives you that. Anything else? Thanks.
Thanks, Ron. Actually pretty good on time. This is great. So what I wanted to do real briefly was just, Bryce and I wanted to give you kind of a quick update on the financial situation of the division. Anybody not familiar with the predicament that we are currently in? Yeah, great. Okay, thanks, Jason. You owe me a beer, I'll explain it to you. I think as everybody knows, just by virtue of a refresher, back in late 2014, the division had found itself in the precarious spot of having over-obligated our aeronautics fund, while at the same time our revenues have declined precipitously. I think most of you know that about 80% of the division's total revenue is derived from the price of commercial jet fuel, most of which is sold at Denver International Airport. And so obviously everybody knows the price of oil and jet fuel has gone down significantly over the last few years. So Bottom line was, in late 2014, the division essentially overdrafted our checking account. I think you all know that circumstance, and we were very fortunate. I'm sorry.
Move to that side.
Move to this side? Oh, I'm sorry. All right.
Not able to get your.
Okay. There we go. Get my good side? Yeah. Blocking the camera. Thanks, Todd. So, long story short, back in April of 2015, the division was issued a short-term, 5-year, $11 million, essentially a line of credit from the State Controller's Office that allowed us to do a couple of things. It allowed us to continue to honor all of our existing grant obligations that we had in place at that time. All of you, if you've read the fine print in your grant contracts, we have the ability to call those back at any time. We didn't want to do that because we realized that would result in the loss of a lot of federal funding and a lot of projects across the state. So the CDOT was successful in negotiating that loan. That loan, as you would expect, had some conditions to it, and one of the conditions was that CDOT, the Aeronautical Board, and the division entered into a memorandum of understanding that very clearly outlined the expectations of everybody involved in how we would fix the internal structural issues that we had that led that situation to happen, to make sure that that didn't happen again. And so when I joined the division in July 2015, my marching orders from the CAB and CDOT and from all of you as our stakeholders was pretty clear. Don't let what happened in 2014 happen again, and communicate with us. Tell us what you see. Tell us what's going on, because again, one of the biggest challenges that we learned back in 2014 is that you all found out at the last minute that we had an issue, and that's not cool. We want to know now, or I want you to know now, that we have a situation in place where if we do see an issue coming, you'll know about it. We can't accurately predict the price of oil. If anybody in this room could do that with any level of certainty, you'd all be rich, you wouldn't be here. But we are really trying to do a better job of doing that. So let me give you a quick snapshot of where we think we are. And we are really fortunate to have Bryce on our team. Bryce came to us in March. He has an incredible analytical mind. He comes from the oil and gas industry, so he's got a great line on the intel in that world, and he has made some very, very spectacular strides in the way that we're doing things internally that will help us avoid that kind of situation again. So just real briefly, here's kind of our current financial situation. That doesn't have a laser pointer in it. Here's the $11 million loan balance. The good news is, right now, we are not anywhere near a situation where we're going to get close to touching that $11 million balance. And one of the ways that we've done that, as you all know, is we have really dialed back the discretionary aviation grant program. We are currently matching only FAA projects. And this year, through at least FY 2020, that cap will be $150,000. So that's one of the ways that we've managed to this number. What we are really trying to manage to is this April 1st, 2020 deadline on the loan. And here's why. The loan is not extendable, and the loan has a condition in it that if we can't meet the April 1st, 2020 deadline, we will pursue a legislative solution to fix the division structure. Nobody wants that. I don't think anybody in this room would agree that our funding stream is flawed or is not effective. It's up to us to manage that stream more effectively. So we are adamant that we really, really want to get out of this loan as soon as we possibly can and get back to more of a traditional, more normal form of operation. So the way we're tracking right now, you can see this is our current fund cash balance. We're down to about $4.7 million today negative into that loan. But we expect that within the next 12 months, we'll start working our way back up. And right now, we're recovering probably sometime in March to August 19 timeframe, so almost a year ahead of the loan deadline. So we're very happy about that. One of the things that we have kept constant throughout this process, based on the feedback that we've gotten from CIOA and the CAB and a lot of our other stakeholders, is our statewide initiatives have stayed at about $1.2 million. And the statewide initiatives, as we'll talk about here in a little bit, that's our Mountain AWAS program, our internship program, Denver surplus equipment program, all of those kinds of things that we continue to do. So those will continue, and we'll continue to look at new ways to add that kind of value to the statewide program. But this is our situation that we're in now. Again, Bryce has just done a fantastic job of working with the rest of us to try to streamline our forecasting, and so I'll turn it over to him now to talk a little bit about some of the scenario-based forecasting that we're going to start looking at and how we're doing that.
Yeah. So, like Dave pointed out on the other slide, currently on our hybrid model that we're in the process of building, which we're working a lot with Denver International, they're obviously a disproportionate chunk of the revenue for the division. So we're working with them to really kind of streamline our forecasting process to give us good dates. What we're showing you here, that has some of the data in there, but what we're obviously focusing on is the price of fuel. And when we look at, 6 different scenarios, and I'll explain why we have these percentages here. The base EIA forecast, and we have everything converted to oil here so you can see the price per barrel because everybody understands that. It's publicly out there and easy to get. But historically, over the last decade, we did some analysis, and EIA's forecast that they're projecting typically is about 13% higher than what actually happens, and that's why we've got this kind of shaded here, because historically they've been a little optimistic, and that's been, through a downturn, through an upturn, it's kind of lived the cycle of that. So we really wanted to use that core number as a way to compare everything. If historically it holds, and we are 13% below their projected fuel price, that gives us a recovery date, and I know Dave referenced it, of August 2019 currently. I will point out a quick typo here. This March 19 should be July 17. And on that previous slide, you'll notice our blue is kind of even for the year here. This year is really going to be kind of our transition year where our bank account balance is going to stay relatively fluid because we're pretty much to the point where we've seen the worst part and everything's getting on even, and we're going to start growing here and hopefully getting out of the hole, like you said, in these time frames here. But we do provide this moving forward with our CAB date, or with our CAB board meeting, so this is available online and will be here as well. Down here, we just simply, all these numbers here are basically put to a graph to show when we're crossing that zero threshold. The base EIA forecast is the dotted line, and then we also used a minus 22%, and the reason for that one is that's our way of saying, okay, what's our worst case scenario? As long as we are going to be out by April 2020, which is the deadline for that, the MOU that we have with CDOT and the CAB, as long as EIA forecasts are, even if they're 22% below what they're forecasting, we're still going to be out of debt by that time frame with our current funding models. We've looked at different ways to get more revenue, including cutting back the grant awards even further, which we don't want to do. We want to be able to, eventually bring that up, hopefully, and reset kind of the way it's been done before. So this is just kind of a real quick snapshot for everyone, just to give you some confidence that we are monitoring things and we are aware of, obviously, the fluidity of the oil prices. And then as we work with DIA to get some more information, especially with the large uptick in flowage that they've had over the past 6 months, it's starting to paint a little better picture. But as far as the message here, we're definitely monitoring this. If your airport has anything significant that's going to change, if you plan on your fuel sales quadrupling or something overnight, definitely just shoot me a note, let me know, because that's additional information we can build into not only our short-term but our long-term forecast as well. So if you do have any questions about this, please don't hesitate to let me know. And I know Dave has referenced it many times in the past. Once we get back above the break-even point, and towards the end of that previous slide, we were showing some pretty healthy cash balances. That doesn't mean that we're going to be saying, "Here's money."
Yeah, and that's the one thing I want to reemphasize. We're starting to see it in some of the CIPs. If you go back to this slide, we are not automatically rich right here at $6 million to have that kind of money, and I'll explain why. One of the things that, as you know, we did a performance audit, had 23 recommendations as a result of our situation. One of those was, man, you ought to think about having a contingency or reserve program, and right now our thought is that at the front end of that, we will probably preload potentially 2 different reserve accounts. A contingency account to account for a completely unforecasted decline in oil prices or consumption across the state that gives us a little bit of a hedge against that, and a reserve account that's probably, we haven't worked all this through, there's just some ideas we're kicking around, a reserve account that we would be able to use that if all of a sudden a lot of extra discretionary money came to the state, we were in a position to help a sponsor leverage that, or if somebody had an emergency, and every airport every now and again has a construction project that goes awry, we would be in a position to adopt that. So I want to make sure we're tempering our expectations a little bit about that, and I'm going to jump ahead on the agenda a little bit if you guys will give me that ability. One of the things that we're going to do with this and the scenario-based forecasting that we just looked at, one of the tools that will allow us to do is go, wow, okay, hey, oil is trending down here. What does that mean we have to do with our grant program up here? We'll be able to take just one quick look and see what we think we need to do and then communicate that to all of our airports. That's going to be the key with that. The other thing we're working on is getting back to, all right, when we do end up with a reasonable discretionary grant program, how are we going to invest that money across the state? As Linda articulated, the needs always exceed the revenue available. That's true on the federal side, it's true on the state side. The benefit that we have is that our money is a lot more flexible than the Fed's money is. It's discretionary. It's up to the Aeronautical Board to decide how we do that. The biggest tool that we have that we use to determine what those priorities are at the state level is our state systems plan. Those of you that are familiar with that document know it's pretty out of date. It hasn't been updated since 2011 for a couple of reasons. One, it's a 7-figure initiative to update a state systems plan, and right now we don't really have that kind of money available. Second of all, we didn't really want to do a systems plan now and have the first 3 years of it be stale because we didn't have any money to invest in that plan. So we're working with the FAA, and thanks to a grant we expect to get from them in FY18, probably a year from now, we'll kick off an update to that state systems plan update that will inform the board and the staff and all of you on how we think our state discretionary grant funds should be invested, and you will all be a part of that. That's obviously not done in a vacuum, so that's certainly a big initiative for us. Concurrent with or immediately after that, we're also planning and budgeting to update our economic impact study, which was last done in 2013. How many of you have used that in your local community or seen it referenced somewhere? I'm surprised it's not higher than that, but we have a lot of demand for that. There was an article in the Denver Post a few weeks ago about Centennial Airport that referenced the economic impact study that we did. We hear that that's a really valuable tool. If we do that concurrent with or immediately adjacent with the state systems plan, a lot of the data that is needed for the state system plan can be used in the economic impact study. It will make both of those less expensive to do, which means we have more money to provide to the state system. So we're really looking to leverage those kinds of things to be more efficient with the money that we do have. So you'll see those, again, probably kicking off late next year. We'll look for your input on that. But our goal is, again, as Bryce said, is we really want to make sure you all know about this stuff. Every month, and Chair Beck snuck in, Ray, if you would raise your hand. Ray Beck is the chair of our Aeronautical Board. Every month in their board packet, they get a detailed financial snapshot, including the latest version of this slide here. So you can download that off our web. It's always up there for you to look at. We're trying to be absolutely transparent so you all know where we are. And this is all up here now in a really easy to use format. So please take a look at it if you have any questions. And then I'll get all my stuff out of the way. The other form of revenue that the state does have, I want you to all remember, is the State Infrastructure Bank, or the SIB loan program. As of today, there's about $11.2 million in the aeronautics loan account. You can get a loan for pretty much any amount, up to 10 years. The interest rate's 2.25%. We have, and since I came here in July, we've gotten 2 SIB loans out the door. I didn't see Gary in here. Greeley has taken a loan, and so has Colorado Springs. One of the things that I heard my very first week on the job was that that's a great source of money, but it's really hard to get. It takes too much. There's a lot of BS associated with getting the loan done. So I heard that loud and clear. We sat down with the Transportation Commission that has a part of the loan approval process, as well as the Division of Admin and Finance at CDOT. It's a key part of that. And we have really streamlined the process. In Colorado Springs' case, from the time they came to our office to have a preliminary, kind of brainstorming meeting to the time they got their loan approved was 6 weeks. It was pretty fast. We've made some really big improvements. We've got some new people in key positions that are really anxious to help us get that money out the door. So and again, it's got a pretty broad eligibility. So if that's something that in your CIP you're trying to fill a gap, we would love to see that $11 million out getting used, because again, that's a revolving fund, so your interest comes right back into that, and we can just kick it right back out the door again. So please talk to us, and we'd love to help you with that. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a maximum on that?
There's not a maximum. We probably wouldn't loan out the total $11 million to one airport if that's all that was left, but there's no statutory cap.
Thanks.
You bet. So anyway, yes, sir.
So I've looked at that program.
Right.
My bosses are worried about Tabor laws.
Correct. Your airport needs to be, as I understand it, check with your county or your municipal attorney, your airport needs to be set up as an enterprise fund to have that not be subject to Tabor, is the understanding we have.
Thank you.
You bet.
And Dave, if I might, I
Yes, sir.
believe aren't the Bruce counties eligible as well? I mean,
I think so, but again, I don't know for sure. There's a lot of nuance to the debrucing and the Tabor laws, so I would say check with your county attorney or your city attorney on how that might work. We're happy to work with you. We've got a great, his name's Andrew Wheeler, a great budget analyst with CDOT, who's our liaison now. He's a really great guy, and he can help answer all those questions. So cool. Any questions about our predicament or where we see us heading? Wow. Okay, cool. That's good. I'll take it. Cool. With that, I will turn it over to Todd. And Todd, I'll have you talk about, Scott. I'll skip to you. I'm sorry, Scott. I didn't come up with you to do that. Thanks.
so I was just going to wrap up on a few quick things as far as state grants go this year and moving forward. Dave already mentioned we're still sticking with the same philosophy as last year, which is we're going to have grants available up to 5% match on your federal funds, and that can't exceed $150,000 per project and airport. So there is no overmatch available. It's just limited to that, not only for the upcoming grant cycle, but until basically to be determined in the future. So you'll probably see that sticking through all the CIP updates we're going to be doing this fall, all the way out into the outer years until we determine that that philosophy has changed or increased. Also, just a reminder, because we've gotten some questions about it, similar to the last 2 years, although our board will act on the grants for FY17 in February, we don't immediately contract them anymore. We wait until we coordinate with the FAA and they have the actual amounts programmed and offered for that project, and then we would then contract at that time the state grant. So we're actually still, as of today, still contracting some grants from last fiscal year's grant cycle because they're just kind of coming in at the end of the year here for this year's projects. And then one other thing we're getting some questions about is as far as our old process of out-of-cycle grant requests or supplemental requests. It's not really a standard procedure anymore that we expect. It's somewhat suspended in essence, that we as a division aren't going to be recommending or supporting additional requests for funding in addition to what we're going to be going through for this grant cycle this fall. But technically, the CAB is available to hear, and the division is willing to talk about any extraordinary situation that could be considered an emergency. So call us if you have questions in that regard. So that's all we had to finish up the grants from the state's perspective. Are there any more questions about state grants for this year or moving forward? If not, we'll move right in to let you know and remind you of all the other programs the state's involved in as far as our statewide initiatives and how those can benefit you, and if you're not aware, to contact your state aviation planner to get more information and participate in some of these programs. And I'll hand it over to Todd to begin talking about some of the programs that we offer.
Thank you, Scott. So statewide programs, and Dave mentioned this, is our statewide programs are very important right now, especially that we're negative $4 million. So our statewide programs are able to go to more than just our NIPIAS airports, and we can really use these programs to really help this system as a whole. So first one I'm going to talk about, because Dave hit on the first three, is our crack fill program. We really had to scale back our runway. We had a runway scheduled for the division every year till the end of time before the issue hit. And so we had to do a massive slide of those airport projects. And so the crack fill program became very, very important to the division. Previous to this year, we were funding crack fill material to airports at 75% up to $5,000 for the material. Because of our current situation, we want to make sure that airports have access to crack fill to make sure that those cracks are getting filled, to try to get those pavements to last as long as possible to when we get money again, we can start getting to those. So our crack fill program has changed, and hopefully everyone has heard this before, but I will just go over it. So our crack fill program, we have changed it. We will match 90% of the material up to $10,000 per airport per fiscal year. So July 1 to June 30th, we can reimburse an airport up to $10,000 for the material only. A few things that we've run into with crack fill is you have to purchase it on state bid. Currently, there are 4 approved state bidders for crack fill, and this all can be found on our website on WIMS. But we are having some of those those bidders charge you a little bit more than what they're showing in the state bid. So just so you know, we are watching that. So when we do get a crack fill submittal, we actually go back to that bid and make sure that the amount they're charging is the amount that we are reimbursing. We're also having some confusion because we will only pay for the material only. We will not pay for shipping charges for you. So some of the vendors are getting smart, creative, and they're hiding it into their price. So they're actually upping their bid per ton on this product. So again, we are watching that. This will only be for the material, and if we do get one that shows a higher number, a higher cost than what they're showing in the state bid, we will call you and we'll actually have you amend that and resubmit it. But crack fill reimbursement, we also used to do those purely on paper. It was a fun process. We lost some pages on that every once in a while. That is all done on WIMS now. Along the top, hopefully some of you have seen it. So we have the CIP is the first tab, grants is the second tab. I believe it goes to taxes and then crack fill. So it's very similar to how you do a drawdown. You purely put your information in there. It calculates how much we reimburse you. You attach your backup right there and you submit it to us. We pay it just like a drawdown. Next program, another big one for us, is our internship program.
Hey, Todd?
Yeah, absolutely.
Our fuel reimbursement, is all airports eligible for that, or only certain?
All the airports are eligible for that, other than privately owned airports, which I don't think we have any here, other than Meadow Lake's not here and Animas is not here. But beyond that, yes. So yeah, beyond non-NIPIAS as well are eligible for this program. And currently we have only had, I can actually tell you, I wrote it down, 4 airports submit a crack fill request so far this year, for a total of $24,000 we've given out so far in this program. So this fall is a good time to crack fill your airport. So please get that done, because the longer you can make your runway last, the better chance we may find some money to help you fix it. Again, internship program, big one for the division. Over half of our staff members at the division actually went through this internship program, so definitely one we support. Currently we have 6 airports that have internships funded 50% by the division. So this program, any airport can submit for this. We reimburse 50% of their salary up to $16,640, which is, you can pay an intern $16 an hour, and we will reimburse you $8 an hour of that salary. But what we need to make sure is that you have a full syllabus approved by the division for this. So it's a really important program. We love to see this program work out. Because again, we've had airport managers from across the country go through this internship program. So any questions on this, please give us a call if you're interested and want to just kick around some ideas of whether an intern makes sense at your airport. We'd love to talk about it. Next one, Airport Sustainability Program. This is our newest program. We just actually kicked this off to all the airports in Colorado in June. You now have the availability to go on to WIMS. There's a nice little sustainability tab. I believe it actually turns green when you touch it. That you can actually go through the entire process of developing a specialized airport sustainability plan for your airport. Starts off with a profile update. So it's 75-ish different fields that you have to fill out about your airport. Has to do with some financial information, operational information, and then whether you've been tracking energy, waste, recycling programs. So it's a step-by-step process of going through and actually developing a airport sustainability plan for you. And with that, we're actually seeing some more uses for the airport profile. So in the profile is that 75 different fields I was talking about. We are able to see those on a statewide basis. So actually, the more airports that go in there and submit that information, as a division, we're actually able to see that on a statewide basis. And so we're actually looking to, in the future, make that a possible requirement to submit for a state grant. Right now, that is purely voluntary. We're looking to possibly require that for our FY18 program. So not our upcoming program, but possibly the next. But again, purely voluntary, and we really highly recommend every airport get in there and at least do your profile. And the cool thing about the profile is year after year, you're tracking that information. So the more airports that do it every year, we'll be able to start showing a trend analysis of where all that information is going. So huge program. Mead and Hunt actually helped us out with that and did a great job with it, and actually submitted us for a award recently for airports going green that we just actually found out we got here recently. So huge program, very, very proud of that program. Next one, USDA. How many people here know we have a contract with USDA to help airports? Hopefully, I would like to see all the airports' hands up for that. Huge program. So it's been 10 years now. We have been contracting with USDA to help provide wildlife mitigation at airports. Our person who usually does this is Kendra Cross. She actually has taken a promotion within USDA. She is now a district manager, but she is still the one providing this. We actually just interviewed her replacement this last Friday, so hopefully we'll have someone on board, and I know some of you are owed phone calls back from USDA. Hopefully those will happen shortly, because they are very short-staffed right now. But they do amazing things, so they are the ones responsible for doing training at all the Part 139 airports. You can call them up if you have a prairie dog issue. Say, hey, we're getting run over by prairie dogs. Please come help us take care of this issue. Because they can come in and take care of things discreetly if they need to, depending on where you are. No idea what we're talking about with that, I'm guessing. But a really good program. They provide a lot of benefit to us, and we have heard from all the airports they've been at that this is a huge asset for them to come help, because a lot of airports don't have the manpower to take care of these things themselves or the permitting themselves. So it's a very big program for the division. And then all of these on here, all our statewide programs, there's another tab on WIMS that is called statewide programs, and it goes into every one of these kind of in detail to give you a good overview of what that program is and really how it can help you as an airport. So that sums up the 4 that I was responsible for, and luckily Caitlin got back with lunch, so she can jump into the next one for us. That was nice timing.
Thank you, Bryce. I'm parking the car. Surplus equipment. How many airports have participated in the surplus equipment program? Awesome. How many of you don't know what it is? Okay, good. That's good. The surplus equipment program currently is a wonderful partnership that we have with Denver International Airport. The gentleman that manages their fleet over there gets in contact with us usually toward the early summer, May, June-ish, to tell us what pieces of equipment are airport related that they can get rid of, and they sell them to airports first. So usually their stuff goes to public auction. These items come to us first, and auction is really not the best way to put it. We do it like a surplus sale. It's very much like a fantasy football draft. You get a pick, and it's not the same. It has nothing to do with how large your airport is or what your needs are or what your CIP is. It's all luck and how much you like us. Just kidding. But last year we sold 22 pieces of equipment to 11 airports. The board is very supportive of this program, especially now in the current funding situation we're in, because these pieces of equipment relieve the CIP a lot. Instead of $800,000 for a piece of equipment, we can spend $30,000 on a blower, and 80% of that is covered by the state, 20% by the locals. Eagle just replaced your entire blower fleet, correct? Last year with the surplus program.
We got 3 brooms.
3 brooms, okay, 3 brooms. And this was the second time that you'd used it for something similar, to replace a large piece of the snow removal contingent for the airport. The first pick currently is 80% state, 20% local. The second pick is 50-50. So is the third pick, 50-50. After that, it's all on you. It's 100% local. The deals are still really, really good. If you guys that are not familiar with the surplus sale, I can pass around the results from this past year, and you can see what was purchased for what amounts and paid what. The board gave us $250,000 to spend. All the airports left with the equipment that they wanted that was available when their pick came about, and we only spent about $160,000. So there's still room for more people to participate. In the next year, we're looking at ways to improve the surplus program or expand it, change it, to include other airports, to include other items more than just possible equipment. So if any of you have any comments or suggestions, please let me know, because I've been tasked with looking at that. And obviously you guys are the ones that benefit from it. So I would like to know your thoughts on that one. We've talked about like reflectors from bigger airports that can go to smaller airports, different pieces of equipment. Some of the not necessarily Denver International sized airports, but smaller airports that still, smaller airports than them could still take advantage of. All of the airport equipment from Denver has been in their fleet the previous year. It hasn't been sitting out in the boneyard. It's all been in the fleet, and now it's on its way to a new home for a new life with lots more useful life left in it past what the FAA says they have to do. So anybody have any surplus questions, comments? Yes, sir.
The only comment I have is don't put the inspection day and the sale day back to back. Put a weekend between it, because it really helps when you're the lone person at an airport. You got to be away 2 days at a shop.
Okay.
And then if you could put a few days in between inspection and sale,
okay,
it would help some people.
Okay. I will. Okay.
Well,
yes, sir.
Conversely, you know, we send people down, you know, for they come down for inspection, have to come down several days later.
So you'd like the same day?
What's that?
You'd like it the same day?
I'm not going to argue too much.
Okay. No, I mean, we need input, because options aren't bad either. So if we have one the previous week and then a preview in the morning and a sale the afternoon, all the, I mean, I would like everyone's feedback so we can genuinely change it for the best.
You agree with the same day?
You'd be good with same day?
The same day would be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, same
You
day?
do that.
Then I don't have.
I think the same day would be best, just based on the amount of information you're able to provide us now. You know, you provide us with a lot of detail,
Pictures,
pictures, and, you know,
Okay.
we can actually target what we want to specifically look at. Having it the same day, I think would be advantageous for everybody.
Perfect. And the gentlemen that we deal with at Denver, they are very good about answering questions as well. So since we get all the information about the pieces that are available, if you have a question on a specific one, you can email me and we'll get it to Denver, or you can email straight to Denver and we can get you the answers on those pieces of equipment too if you have bigger questions. Yes, sir.
Just the last question. In some of the past years, the grant has also included some of the sort of makeup
Maintenance.
pieces or, you know,
Yes.
tires.
At this point, we are not able to do the maintenance grants.
Yeah.
In the future, as funding and the levels and stuff come back up, that's a possibility. But at the current time, we would rather get as much equipment as we can out to where it needs to be, and use our money that way.
And so this program is outside the CIP, we don't put this kind of stuff in the CIP?
Correct. But sometimes it's a great way to relieve stuff in your CIP. There's things that you need to have that may be a very large drain on your CIP, some of those big pieces of equipment. And this, you can come do this, only pay the 20%, and get a much better deal on it. And then you can use your entitlements and other things for those bigger, different high priority projects.
And where do we go to see what's available?
It happens about once a year. I can show you the list of what was available this year, so you can just get a feel for it. This year we had three tractors that were very popular. They were, I think, in the first 4 picks, all 3 of the tractors were gone. We had 2 airports come from quite a ways away that wanted the tractors and didn't get them, but they still left happy because they at least had a shot at it. And then I just encourage you, after you've made your sale, coordinate with DIA to pick up your equipment. Don't just show up and want it, because they get a little frazzled with that. They're a big animal and they're not very nimble as far as just swinging over to the west gate to get your stuff. Anything else?
You might mention the DI mentioned if there's any big equipment next year.
Oh yes, and Denver did mention to us that this coming year they're going to have more big equipment, which they told us last year. We got the tractors, we got a few more things, but more bigger airfield stuff for next year. So watch your emails mid-spring, early summer, and we'll keep you posted. And if throughout the year if you have a question or if you think you missed it, or just let me know and I will do my best to get you the info you need or put you on the list that you need to be on. Thank you.
So the next programs we were going to talk about was PCI and 5010. And so, you know, although we would like to do it more often, I'm sure you all know we come by at least once every 3 years to your airport. And that's why, because we're doing PCI inspections and 5010 inspections. And the PCI is our pavement condition indexing. And we've recently renewed our contract with Applied Pavement Technology, who is a pavement engineer that helps us collect this data, put it into usable reports, and provide it for everyone's use, including your own. And so basically, every 3 years, we will do both of these inspections at your airport concurrently. And you can go to our website right now and find a map of your airport with all your PCI data, pictures, distresses. And this is something that's very useful for several reasons. One, that ourselves and the feds will look at this for almost every pavement project, rehab, pavement maintenance that is planned in the CIP, or even if it may not be planned and maybe we realize it hasn't been addressed. So these PCI values, which rate your pavement from 0 to 100, are very valuable to everyone involved in the CIP planning and funding process. And then next, the 5010s we do as a contract by GCR, who's contracted by the FAA, similar to most other states. And we will go out to your airport and review any basic safety data information, approach obstructions, and basically any general information that ends up getting published in what used to be called the AFD. I hear there's a new term for it from the FAA side. I don't even remember what it is. Do you remember, Todd?
Chart supplementals.
Chart supplementals. So we will basically be updating all the information that's supplied on that for pilots. And so although we do come by once every 3 years, if you do notice a major change needs to be done, call us, let us know, and we can work to submit that to get that updated for you. But that's a brief overview of those programs. Any questions on those?
Available online with PCI. I just want to make sure everybody knows all the PCI information is.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it's on our website, but along with everything else here, information, but not only the information about the programs, the PCI data is on the website in an interactive browser that you can view pretty much any airport in the state. Anybody has access to. It's public information. Any other questions? Okay, next I'll hand over to Christine, who is the AWAS program manager, and she's going to tell you a little bit about our AWAS program.
We currently have 12 mountain AWAS units. Last week we were able to relocate our unit at Wolf Creek Pass to allow us better grounding, better access, and better security. We hope to have our 13th site at Dakota Hill by the end of the year. Probably what would be most beneficial for you guys to know is we do offer a grant through CAOA for data collection. So if you're not part of that, please contact your airport planner and see how you can get in the queue for that. That's pretty much it for AWAS.
Christine is a little bit modest, but she does a fantastic job with our AWAS. One of our statutory mandates in our legislation is that we'll improve aviation safety, and she's done great work with our AWAS network. We have 13 of them, soon to be 13, across the high country. Pilots love them. It really has made a big difference for us, and she's done a great job working that to keep that price down. It's actually interesting, the Governor's Office of Information Technology actually maintains our AWAS units for us under contract, and we've got a great group of people that know our systems inside and out, and so kudos to you for doing a great job with that. She's kind of modest, you know, but she does a great job with all that. And our AWASs are great. We'll be looking at maybe expanding the AWAS system going down the road. It's a great way for us to improve aviation safety. And again, those are all off airport. They're all in the mountains. We don't fund on airport AWAS units, but the Dakota Hill one is going to be right by Corona Pass, Rollins Pass, which is one of the most heavily used lighter plane passes coming off the front range. So kudos to you for doing a great job. Thanks.
Thanks.
Question about that?
Yeah.
So if we have one of those units installed at our airport and we're getting the grant to provide the equipment there, is there a way to get it covered for the maintenance of it?
Not for the maintenance.
Can you repeat your question for the camera?
So just state the question.
Can you repeat that question? I'm sorry. You want to know if you can get...
My understanding, I'm new to people, but I understand that we have your equipment, we're getting a grant from you to have the equipment there. But I understand we have to pay for the maintenance of it?
Correct. You do have to pay for the maintenance of the AWAS unit.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Perfect.
that it? All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and jump in real quick, talk about the airport directories and the charts. Be on the lookout for an email, airport managers, that you'll be getting. You're going to receive basically a spread of what appears in our airport directory. Take a look at that now, brush through, make sure everything looks correct, and then when I send you the email, you can just send me back all of your red marks. If you want to go ahead and do it now too, that's fine. So go ahead and just mark it up, red mark it, however you can get me the information, and the changes best is fine. And one of the other developments is instead of doing the airport directory printing on a biannual basis, we decided to go ahead and do it on an annual basis. We found that every time I put that thing to the press, the day after there's something that's changed. So we're going to try to update that a little bit more. And then in the meantime, also, if there's anything in the middle of the year that comes up that's a big change, or you want something that's highlighted on the aerial photo, let me know. That way I can get it changed, and I have a PDF version, the latest one, up on our website for download, so I usually keep that one up to date on a regular basis. The chart will remain the same. We're going to continue to do that on a biannual basis, but that's really about it for the charts and directories. Anybody have any questions? Easy enough? All right.
I just wanted to say, I think that in these eight statewide initiatives, the feedback we get is that we really do a lot with $1.2 million, $1.4 million. We are always looking for ways or new programs to add on a statewide benefit that would benefit all of you or the aviation community. So if you have an idea of something that you think we could do on a statewide basis, please let me know. I'll give you a couple of examples. One of the conversations we've had with some of the airports, probably 40 or 50% of the airports in Colorado do not have what I would call career airport managers or professional airport managers at the helm. They're folks that are public works directors or street folks, somebody that's been tasked with taking care of the airport. And a lot of times those folks just don't have the knowledge about the unique circumstances of running an airport. So one of the things that I've been passionate about doing is, and you'll probably see us trying to do this, is doing an Airport 101 management class every year, where for those folks, we'll pay for those people to come to Denver and learn a little bit about the basics of running an airport. That helps us do a better job. It helps the FAA do a better job. It helps you be better stewards of your airport back in your community. So if you have ideas like that you think we could leverage statewide, we would love to hear them. The board has been very, very supportive of these kinds of statewide initiatives. I had a conversation with the assistant city manager from Brush, I'm forgetting your name, I'm sorry, about doing a rates and charges survey. Something that would be very expensive and probably hard for you to do on your own, but we might be able to leverage our resources to do it in-house or to hire a consultant to do it. So again, if you have anything that you would like us to see on a statewide level that would benefit you and other airports, please let us know, because we get a lot of bang out of those bucks. We are never going to have $20 million a year to give away in CDAC grants anymore, I can safely say that. But we will have the kind of revenue and resources to do these sort of things. So we would love your thoughts. CAO has been very engaged with us on those kinds of things. Other things you may see us do, we used to fund, again, we have a safety mandate. We used to fund the Colorado Pilots Association's mountain flying class. I participated in that here at Rocky Mountain Metro. That was about 2 months ago. They sold out right away. They had 75 people, half of which were not from Colorado. It was really cool. And so those were people that learned how to fly more safely here. We used to help pay that and help underwrite part of the cost of that program. So we're going to get back into doing those kinds of things once we get back into a financial standpoint. But again, any ideas, please let us know. Get with your planner, get with me. We would love to see how we can continue to do a better job for aviation statewide. I think that's really about it. I think that's all we have between us and lunch. We have some wrap up and a round table afterwards if you want to. I know some of you are sticking around for some mini joint planning conferences with your FAA and your state planners, but in the next 10 minutes before we have lunch ready, is there anything else you guys want to talk about? Any questions for anybody? Caitlin?
I just want to let you all know that we have this room until 5 o'clock this evening. So since you and your airport, or you and your consultant, whatever the case may be, are all in the same room, feel free to use it however you need. That was part of the reason that we want to have everybody here. So you guys can talk, even if you're not talking with us or the FAA, you can talk amongst yourselves about your CIP and get it ready to get submitted. That's another one of the benefits of all of us being here today. And thank you again for coming.
Thank you. Ready?
Oh, yeah.
Are we ready?
Yeah, let me
I don't wanna get
uncover the
into
lid and we're
voice
ready.
Too soon.
No, we're good.
Yes, sir.
Are we coming back and doing Q&A or?
We'll be back in here for Q&A after lunch. You come back in here and grab your lunch, and when we're wrapped up, we'll just do that here.
Okay, I'm going to stop the streaming from here.
Jason?
If I have the ability to do this, but on behalf of the CAO, I wanted to just say hi to the new airport managers that are in the room. For those of you that are new to the state, I just wanted to say welcome. For those of you that are here, I know we have one at Pueblo, Medellin, and then Steamboat in the back. I just wanted to say hi and welcome you to Colorado. Welcome you to the State Division of Aeronautics has a great. This is a great meeting, and I just wanted to say welcome and hope that you'd consider participating in the Colorado Airport Operators Association. So just a shameless plug.
Alamosa.
And Alamosa too. So yeah, great. There's a lot of new faces. So I just wanted to say hi. I'm the Vice President. Lori Hinton, as mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, is our past president. So we have a winter conference coming up in the end of January where we have a legislative reception. So keep that open on your calendars. I think that our website, coloradooairport.org, has that information on there. We'll be updating that, but keep in mind that that's coming up, I think, as far as our organization goes. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware. So thank you.
You stole my thunder. I feel bad that I didn't have a chance. Do you all want to stand up and introduce yourselves, please, as the new folks? I think we'd all like to know.
I'm Jim Turner, and I started 10 days ago in Pueblo, so I have no idea.
Welcome.
I'm Justin Ollinger. I started the same day as him in the San Luis Valley Regional Airport. Came from Colorado Springs and San Antonio.
Welcome also. Very good.
Stacy Bain, I'm at Steamboat, and this is my third year coming back.
Lunch is going to be.
It's just up front there.
Oh, out front there. All right. Got it.